Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of the DeVaney Music Podcast. In this episode, I interview my friend Derek Charles Johnson. This interview was recorded leading up to Derek's performance at City on the Hill Festival, which just took place here recently in Duluth, Minnesota. I could give more of an introduction, but I get to that in the interview, so let's dive right in. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the DeVaney Music Podcast. I'm your host, Ian DeVaney, and today with me I have my friend Derek Charles Johnson, who is a worship leader, and I would say a singer-songwriter, and also podcaster, blogger, and I would also say a professional encourager. So thanks for coming on today, Derek.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ian. Sometimes I think what's that phrase? Just a jack of all trades, master of none. Where you just kind of dabble in things, but I definitely enjoy all of those things, and it's just great to connect with you and be on your podcast. This is awesome.
Yeah, and I kind of feel the same way. Like I've said before, I think everyone should know something about everything and everything about something. Mm-hmm. So it's like, know a lot, at least at a surface level. You can do a lot, but then be really good at least one or a few things. So yeah.
Right, exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. I agree. There's a lot of things I don't know, but I guess there's a few things that I know enough of to carry on a conversation, and at least always be learning or wanting to learn is a good attribute to have. So I try to have that as much as I can.
Yeah. And we were just talking about this, but you grew up in Minnesota, correct?
Correct. Yep. Born and raised in Duluth area. Went to high school in Proctor, and pretty much until I went away to college, which was just over to Fargo at North Dakota State. I, was always in Duluth. We never moved anywhere. So, yeah, still really consider Minnesota to be home, and Duluth is always a fond place in my heart. So I still have my parents up there, and my sister and brother-in-law and their kids, and so still a lot of ties to that whole area.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I can remember exactly when I met you, but I know that you've played in Duluth a lot over the years at City on the Hill Festival and Wood City, Gospel Tab. Did you also play at Lake Fest? Did you hear about that one?
I've heard about it. I've never played at it, but I've heard it. Is it still like a yearly thing, or?
I don't think it is.
Okay. I remember you booked for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I booked for them for a couple of years, and I'm not sure what happened after that. But yeah, I was just trying to remember. But I know that I probably got to know you the most from working merchandise at City on the Hill. So I think that's where I've met and talked to you the most. So
I think so. Yeah, it's always been nice to have a familiar and friendly face when doing City on the Hill, and there's always like different people there, and some are the same from one year to the next, but you always kind of gravitate towards the faces that you're like, oh, there's Ian, or there's this person, and so yeah, City on the Hill, I'm really excited that just for one, it's happening, and it's obviously we missed a year of a lot of events and concerts and stuff, but I'm glad that it's happening, and I'm excited about the lineup, and just to see a lot of those familiar faces, and hopefully meet some new faces as well. That just for me, it's as much about doing the event as it is just connecting to people, and I love just as much just the time off the stage, meeting people, kind of finding out where they're from. And carrying on some of those connections. Like that's something that's always drawn me back to that event in particular, but just anything, especially up in the Northland, just coming back and kind of striking up some of those conversations and seeing people again. It's always a blessing to me. I don't know if I probably come away more encouraged by it than I leave encouraging to other people, but I'm really glad it's happening, and I hopefully everything just keeps opening up, and feel like we got to get back out and start doing shows again and
Mm-hmm.
ministering the love of Jesus. And it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I was excited to hear that they were doing the full festival again this year too. In fact, I've been a little out of the loop. I didn't really know what was going on until about a week ago. Like I knew the festival was happening, but there hadn't been a lot of communication. So I finally reached out to one of the managers. I'm like, am I still doing merchandise? And he's like, yeah, you are. He's like, I'm on a trip though, so I'll get back to you eventually. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
Cool.
hopefully there are a few people lined up to volunteer already, and I don't have to work too hard doing that for the next 2 months. But yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's I think there was a time in there where they were really talking about it, and I saw a lot on social media, like, oh, it's happening. And then there was kind of this pause for a little while, and maybe it was just not knowing for sure what all was going to happen in Minnesota and
Mm-hmm.
where everything was at. And then it's like all of a sudden it's just like, yeah, everything's full,
Mm-hmm.
full board. We're going ahead with everything. So that kind of the same thing, like, is it still happening? Is everything on? And, is everybody that's scheduled for the,
Mm-hmm.
because there's pretty much, I think they rebooked. Maybe there was one artist that wasn't coming that they weren't able to get or something, but looks like a solid lineup. You've got, I think, Toby Max one of the nights, and he's amazing.
Yeah.
Like just that one name, you're like, wow, that's a big name to get. So yeah, they keep getting just better and better stuff every year. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think it was definitely rumored that they were going to have DC Talk play at one point, but
wow,
I work for them sort of, and I don't even know if that's true or not, but I was kind of secretly hoping that it was, but I don't think it is at this point. So yeah.
One of these years, like, let's do it. Let's just, that, just knowing that you are, and I've just kind of followed some of your posts about music, and you definitely have, I'm sure, probably a more vast palette of things that you were into. But I was just thinking about, doing this podcast, and just thinking of probably a lot of overlap that we have in some of our musical tastes, specifically within Christian music. And just, from, I probably definitely, the 90s were like my decade of just really Christian music, DC Talk, Jars of Clay, all Newsboys, everything from that decade. But even like, smaller independent stuff too. And so I'm guessing you probably have a lot of similar tastes and background of what you enjoyed and what you still kind of gravitate toward.
Yeah. And since you brought it up, I know. Well, for one, I didn't really get into music at all in any meaningful way until I was at least 11 or 12. I kind of thought that music wasn't cool for some reason as a young kid. And I think it's mostly because my mom kind of just listened to the typical 90s kind of worship, Sandy Patty, whatever was around at the time.
Yep. And
my brother listened to death metal, and stuff like that. And then my sister listened to just really bad pop music. So in my house, I was exposed to all of this music that I just completely did not like and was not interested in. So at some point, someone just gave me a radio though, and I started listening to the Christian rock station here, which sadly is no more. But I remember the first band I really got into was Audio Adrenaline. They were one of the big ones. And then Switchfoot and Jars of Clay and all of those bands. But yeah, I think I saw you posted on my page a while ago, like, oh, look, I found someone else who likes both Tourniquet and Michael Card. So
yeah.
I thought that was funny too. But
yeah, man. Like, I probably started out back in, like, I don't know. My sister exposed me to a lot of music, and I think I would go in and just take, cassette tapes at the time, go and steal things out of her room and put them in the, the Walkman or whatever. And but stuff like Petra and White Heart, were really bands that I was really into. PFR.
Okay.
Michael W. Smith, obviously, Amy Grant, those ones. There was some point though where, like, the circle of friends that I had in high school and the stuff we were listening to, it's kind of like, well, what's heavier than this? What's, the next? So that's where you kind of get this progression of like Tourniquet and Bride was another band that we were really into.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. And we'd go down to, I think it was called the New Union. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
That became Club 3 Degrees at some point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So my parents, now me having kids, I don't know if I would have let them do it, but somehow they let us take these little mini road trips and go down and see, hey, Tourniquet's gonna be
nice,
or Bride's coming, through, and so maybe we can go. And so we'd all get in, a car and just do like a quick down for the night, come back, just keep each other awake and come home, and stuff. So but yeah, stuff like that. And then but just everything, Tooth and Nail artists, Supertones, the Plank Eye, just everything. But then, like you said, like Michael Card and this, the whole, there's just so much diversity. And I just found, it was, I can listen to the same stuff in one day, within the same time period. And it just, you can, if you just love music, there's so much even within Christian music. I'm not as up on what's like current now because I don't follow it as much as I should, even for living where I do and stuff. But I think it's just, now it's so much harder because there's just so much being put out. I mean, I forget what the statistic is about how many singles go on to Spotify every day or whatever, but it's just, an insane amount of new music every day. And so just think of like within Christian music, how much is out there, and just to keep up with it, it's crazy. But
and like singles instead of albums, if every band's dropping a single every month, like there's no way to keep up with that. Or I mean, there's more out there, I think, kind of at the grassroots level where there's stuff everywhere across every genre. But then I feel like, the like Christian music industry has kind of shrunk its focus to like just kind of the pop and worship. So that it's really hard to find good music unless you're super intentional, I think. So
I'd agree with that. Yes. Yeah, you got to go looking for it and listen to, find other stuff that's maybe not on those, like the curated pop Christian, you're going to hear a lot of the same stuff on Spotify or wherever, but if you kind of go to some of those independent type of playlists, you might find something else and say, well, hey, discovered a new group, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we can switch to talking about your music then. How did you become a musician and end up putting out an album and all of that? I think your first album was Carry On, right? Or did you? Okay.
Yep. So kind of in the process of becoming a worship leader, just to back way up, like when I graduated in high school and went off to college, I went through pharmacy school. I still am a pharmacist, and I kind of just went towards that route and that career path, knowing that music was always something kind of in the back of my mind, but I never thought of it as like a career path or anything. But after being in pharmacy for a number of years, I definitely felt a burden to go back into the ministry and pursued a Bible college degree with a worship concentration. Just felt like worship was something that I really was interested in and wanted to be a worship pastor. So that whole process that took us, my wife's from the Dakotas, North Dakota, and we ended up moving kind of closer to where her parents lived and where she grew up, and went to school all that time out there, and then ended up on staff at a church in South Dakota for a number of years. And just during that time was really when I I started writing a lot more, and kind of the songs that were on Carry On, I wrote during that time. I think probably 2012 or 13. I can't remember exactly. I was writing, and I would maybe record like short videos or whole songs of on a video, and then
Mm-hmm.
put it on YouTube or something. And this was for a while on YouTube. I don't know if it's still the same way, but you could kind of find these programs to almost like spam people, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
of a video or something, and just send it out to people.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow through that, like I ended up sending it to a guy who followed up with me. His name's Tommy Profit, and he's now he's with like Capital CMG. He's produces NF. He's he's all over the place. But back then he was in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area, and followed up with me and said, hey, if you ever want to do more with your music and have it a little more professionally done, let's talk. And so so that led to recording those songs on that first album, which was all over like a period of about a week. I have an aunt who actually lives close to the Grand Rapids area, so I flew out there and stayed with her, and then just went in every day and recorded in his basement studio in his house. And yeah, that whole process was just really eye-opening as far as just my first experience recording something. Took some of those songs back, did some of them at my church. Some were more just a little bit, not necessarily congregational, but more just kind of maybe a little bit autobiographical for the period of life and the season that I was in, and just kind of figuring out where God wanted me to go. And so that this is a long sorry for the long story.
No, that's fine.
It ended up we ended up being in South Dakota at this church for about 7 years. And I had come down to Nashville for different things over that time, different like songwriter events, worship leading events, and didn't necessarily like think a whole lot of that at the time. But in the last year or so that I was on staff, I had the opportunity to come and do a songwriting event, kind of a retreat down here. And then through that, I stayed connected with the guy who put it on. He was, he had been with like Centricity Records and did like artist management and stuff with them. But I ended up doing like a songwriter kind of an intensive type thing, like a mentorship with him after that retreat, And so just started writing a lot more, after that. And through just different things, like God started stirring in my heart that it was kind of time to step away, I guess, from at least the position I was at. And didn't know if that meant go into a position again somewhere else, or just, back into full-time pharmacy, whatever it was. And long story short, we moved down here to just south of Nashville in 2017, and ended up recording an album that actually came out last year, and with the producer locally here in our town I live in Spring Hill. And so, yeah, just a completely different experience with that album and that writing process and recording process, but both really just cool experiences, just God guiding and kind of walking me through all of that. And I'm still figuring it out now. Like I live down here, is definitely music opportunities all the time, and sometimes I'm like, well, what's next, God? Why am I here? What do you have? And definitely, other outlets that I've been trying to work in, like the blogging and the podcasting and things like that, and just kind of feeling like there's ministry of some sort, and kind of coming out of 2020 and into this year, figuring out where we are to go. And I definitely feel like it's just something that's about preaching the gospel and going out and encouraging people, because there's people that need to know the hope of Jesus. And especially through the year that we've had, there's just so much brokenness and hopelessness that we can convey that through song. We can convey that through worship and our message. And yeah, so, it's awesome to connect with people like you that definitely get that, and just sow seeds into lives wherever we can. So
yeah, definitely. And I know for me, that Carry On album, it definitely had an impact on me personally. About, I guess, 2 years ago, I just went through a really dark period in my life, I guess, with kind of depression and anxiety and I guess what I would call like a relational tragedy, a lot of stuff. And I found myself in a job that I was fine, but I didn't really want to be doing, and it wasn't really fully using my skill set. I was just kind of working as a janitor at the Salvation Army, which I love the Salvation Army, but as I said, it wasn't really my life plan.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know, I reached this really low point where not much really gave me joy at all, and like music, has always been one of the biggest things for me and things that I would turn to in those times. But I even kind of lost that, like that connection to music. But I don't know, at some point I just threw your CD in my car, and for whatever reason, just the lyrics that you wrote and the music was just what I needed, I guess. It was uplifting and I enjoyed the melodies and everything. So I probably listened to your album almost every day for about 2 months and didn't listen to like anything else, So
that thanks for sharing that, because that just really and not, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's super encouraging to hear, because I think a lot of where that album kind of came from was some of my own just struggles with what I was dealing with too, and just kind of the, where's God taking me? What does He want from my life? What am I going to amount to? And actually during that time, like, it was really a balance of doing the day job, which was pharmacy throughout the week to pay the bills, but then to do worship ministry on Sundays, which is what I really wanted to do and what I kind of wanted to be full time in. And I think I went through Bible school with these pie in the sky ideas, like I was going to get out and be, worship pastor in some big church and full time, and that was, going to be it. And didn't realize ministry is not necessarily always going to be like that. And I just I guess some of those songs were just written out of just trying to figure out like what God was trying to tell me through all that. And a lot of times just writing lyrics or thinking of melodies as I'm commuting an hour from where I live to where I'd work for pharmacy, and and getting song ideas and doing a lot of writing just through just life experience, I think, through that time. And that's a lot of where I think songs come out of, and maybe some of the better songs that we write come out of those times, because God's teaching us something, and we're if we're listening, we're hopefully writing about it. If you look at the Psalms, you see where David's writing about stuff that he's going through and wrestling with, and those teach us so much, because we can feel those same things as we're dealing with our own frustrations or questions of God, and asking Him why, why bad things happen or whatever. So yeah, but just all that to say, that's encouraging for me just to hear that, because that's a lot of why I think the record came about, and why it was supposed to happen, because that opportunity just to help other people in whatever they're going through. So
yeah, definitely. But yeah, it was definitely impactful. And yeah, and I had wanted to ask you about that, where it came from, because I felt like because of the lyrics and the music, that obviously that didn't just come from nowhere. You know, usually people don't write meaningful lyrics or music or anything unless it's backed by some kind of experience like that. So
right, yeah, like especially a song like "You Are Good" was a song that's probably one of my more favorite songs from the album. But just talking about God in the highs and the lows and the mountaintops and the valleys, and just realizing that through all of those things, he is good, and sometimes just telling ourselves that, because we forget, as we're going through all those things, like we have to remind ourselves, like, again, like David would say, why so downcast, oh my soul, put your hope in God, and like realize that he is good, and proclaim that over your life, because it's truth, and we need to tell ourselves that, because the world is going to tell us other things, and it's going to cause us to look down and not look up, and put our hope in him. So
yeah, and I know for that reason, I felt one of the standout songs on your newer album was the song "God of All," and I know one of the lines I wrote down from that was just talks about how he's God of shadow, God of light, which I think is alluding to Psalm 139. If I can pull my Bible up over here even, but yeah, and it says 139, 11 through 12. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you.
Yeah.
So
man.
Yeah,
that's right on. And that song, everything on that album except that song was either I wrote on it or co-wrote on it. And that one was an outside. So, another cool thing about living in Nashville and just being around, through my producer and stuff, he gets songs that are pitched and, ideas and stuff. And so we listened to a lot of tracks that, and the crazy thing is you hear these demos and they're like, man, that already sounds like it's a finished, ready to go song, but it's just a demo that some label has or somebody has, and they send out, and you can choose to record it if you want to, and so that one, God of All, was actually an outside write that I heard the demo and I'm like, I really like the song, I really like the message of it, it's simple, and so we ended up just putting it on the record because felt like a song that fit with the record. And that newest album, there's 6 or 7 songs, and there's a period of probably a solid year to year and a half from start to finish. So there's a lot of I guess you could say just a lot of different thoughts that are kind of there. So a song like God of All, just it seems like it helps kind of tie maybe some different themes together, because it seems like a more of an anchor point for maybe the rest of the album in some ways. So
yeah, definitely.
But
was a good song and it fit for sure. Just out of curiosity, who wrote it? Do you know the name of the person, or?
It's the one gal is named Kenna Turner West, and she's pretty prolific songwriter in her own right, and musician. And then I think his name is Aaron Cox, and he's another. And I can't think of who they write with, if it's Centricity or Word or somebody, different labels down here. But these professional songwriters, that's what they do. They just write, and they I wish I had, one, the time, and two, the ability, because it's just like amazing what some of these people, when you get in a room and just the ideas start flying and stuff. So
yeah, well, I know that's how a few artists started out too. Like I know Rich Mullins started out, I think, mostly just writing music for other people until he I guess maybe got sick of other people singing all of his songs. And I think Matt Maher too was just kind of a songwriter and then decided to start playing. But
I think Matthew West too. Like I don't know, he's had cuts by other people, before he kind of started doing his own stuff. But sometimes that's where it begins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was kind of curious about the difference in the production between your first album and then this newer one. I know one of the things that really appealed to me about your first album was just that it was, I feel like, such kind of a bare bones kind of production. Like, I wouldn't say it was like minimalistic, like you had all the instruments there, but it wasn't any frills and just very straightforward. And then on this newer album, it was definitely a lot more of kind of a pop production. And I was curious, what fed into that, I guess. So,
Yeah, I would say, in the time span too, there's about 5 or 6 years. So there's some difference there, but it's a lot of it is when you choose a producer and you kind of get your music through their lens, I guess you could say. So with Carry On too, I think I kind of came to Tommy with these songs and he's like, I'll basically record them as, we'll add stuff, but it'll be you and your guitar and so it's less polished, but it's still me, but the newer record is more polished, but it's still me. I'd like to say, and this newer one was with a guy named Jay Spate, who he just does amazing things, and he definitely has a pop, I'd say, leaning, but he also has done some country and I think he's worked with like New Song and just a lot of different groups. He's been in the area for a long time and just a super cool, humble guy. And so each album is it's like snapshots, I'd say, of what kind of where you were at that point in time and where you're at it's like taking a picture of what you look like 5 or 10 years ago, and then what you look like now, and through music anyway. So, but and sometimes I gravitate towards the more stripped down stuff, and sometimes I like the more pop polished things too. So I know definitely if I'm recording something, like we were talking about, just putting something up on YouTube or whatever, like it's very minimalistic because I can't put 2 beats together to save my life, but if I can get a guitar and a vocal take to go, then that's about the best I can do. So
whatever works.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and at risk of picking on you or your producer friend a little bit, like it did make it a little more difficult for me to get into the new record because I definitely gravitate towards the more old school or minimalistic sound. So I remember when I put it in the first time and it was like really kind of poppy, and there was some auto tune on a couple of tracks. I was like, what is this? Like, this sounds totally different. And so I actually I didn't listen to it for a while because I just put back in your old CD. But then I actually started listening to your new album kind of because I was planning on interviewing you. And I realized that there were a lot of really great songs on it. And I just kind of overlooked them because just that immediate reaction was I'm I don't know,
Yes.
And I would say it was really only two or three songs on the album that had that really strong pop feel. And that's kind of what lost me. But then I started listening to it more, like I said. And there's some great songs. Like I mentioned, God of All, or My Hope Is in the Cross, which I would say is kind of a modern hymn,
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
And if you were to take both and listen to them, back to back, you'd say, wow, this does sound a lot different. And And so even like I'm that way with a lot of groups where back when I was just consuming new music all the time, and you'd get that new album by an artist and you're like, I don't know if I like it. I don't know. This is as good as the one I the last one they put out. And then it's like you listen to it a few more times, and I'm usually like that's my first response. But then, especially, and now we're in such a singles based, just one song at a time. But I still love like getting the whole 10 tracks, 12 tracks, whatever, the full length album, and just going through start to finish. And unless a song really stinks, trying to listen to the whole thing, because I just like to like get that whole experience. So but all that to say, like I can be that way too, where I listen to it a couple times through and I'm like, it's not hitting me. But then the more I just kind of and sometimes it's just the lyrics start to hit me more, or maybe it's just some riff or something, and there's just little things that you pick out and you're like, you can definitely tell when there's albums that an artist does where it just feels like they're phoning it in, and they're they had to make one more to get for their contract with the label or whatever, and so they just kind of whip something together. But yeah, there's just, and art music is so subjective, so even just what we like versus what somebody else likes, it's just, I know that like my music is probably, there's an age limit that's probably I'm not even gonna reach with a lot of people, because it's already
you're not like a hip hop artist or playing just straight pop music or whatever, so yeah.
Right, yeah. I'm already a little past my prime there, so but yeah, it's it all that to say, like, for pointing that out, it's definitely some differences there, and it might be for somebody that has really like Carry On, to listen to seeing for the first time. It's there, you have to give it a chance, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and when I was just listening to it like today, I was like, wow, I feel like I kind of was missing out, because I just I didn't listen to it for a while, and and there's a lot of great music, and I think really deep lyrics on the album too. Another track on the album that I really liked that I think really does have a pop production, but it worked really well, was the Watch Over Me song.
Yeah.
And I loved the lyrics on that, and then I think probably the most fun song on the album was the Doing Something New song. And you've just got that upbeat, funky riff, and like, I think kind of like a Stevie Wonder kind of a clav sound going on and stuff. And
exactly. Yep. It's like you were in the room. You knew that's when we laid that down, it was like, it was cool. And just that was the last song we wrote actually for the album. So seeing that one kind of come together, and knowing that was even kind of more of an outlier than some of the other songs, was like, well, this is cool. They were getting kind of some different brushstrokes throughout the whole thing. So that Stevie Wonder sound.
Yeah, I mean, I always like it when artists kind of just mix in different genres. I was just talking about that with the other guy I was interviewing earlier, Eric Sear, because he kind of lives in folk rock territory in general, but he definitely throws in jazz and classic rock, and cool. I mean, anything. It's kind of all over the place. I mean, he even worked in a musical bit from an old hymn written by Thomas Aquinas,
oh, wow.
That's really awesome. Only sung in Catholic churches, but yeah, I thought it was really cool. So
yeah, it's that, and any of those genres I find cool. Like I'm not somebody who would probably ever do classic rock, but I can appreciate it and be like, I like this style of music, and folk rock, all that. It's like there's, and I like that within Christian music you can have that diversity of of different styles, and it can all be glorifying and edifying. And we've definitely gotten pretty, I don't know what the word is, but the worship movement has definitely become a focal point of Christian music.
It's narrowed a lot stylistically.
It's narrowed a lot. Yeah. And I'm not saying that worship music, I think it's a good trend, and I'm glad we have a lot of worship music. There's definitely, certain artists that every time they release something, it's kind of like the next song on radio. But I like to know that there's also there's room for other types of styles or other expressions. It's all worship, but some of it's maybe less congregational, and it's more just like a type of a psalm where you're just kind of imploring the Lord, or you're just kind of pouring your heart out or whatever, like there's room for all kinds of expressions, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And that's something I was kind of discussing earlier too, is the fact that I think kind of I've grown to not really like the word evangelical, but I'm going to use it anyway, kind of
right,
because of kind of all the different confused meanings it's come to have. But I feel like kind of within the Protestant evangelical movement, we've created this kind of quote unquote Christian entertainment industry, and part of that is music. But I've wondered if we haven't emphasized like entertainment or kind of amusing Christians at the expense of discipleship. And I was curious about what you might think about that, because I see you as someone who's pretty focused on discipleship, particularly in your writing, your blog, and your podcast. So
and it's a great question, and I think something we should be mindful of, that we're not here to just entertain or just kind of keep people comfortable, within the church or our scope. Like sometimes we can get too siloed with the stuff that we're putting out. It just kind of and I think the world kind of notices this, because they have some kind of connotation when they know, like, well, this is a Christian movie, or this is a Christian song, or this is whatever. And that's where I've really something like, I don't know if you've been following this show, the series called The Chosen, but for me, like, it's something where I can say to my Christian friends and non-Christians alike, like, hey, check this out. It's not what you would think of in terms of a Christian production, and thinking it's all cheesy and the acting's really, subpar and stuff like that. It's good. It's quality, it's well written and all this stuff. And I think in that same way, we have to be that way with anything that we put out there. Like it has to have some substance to it, and it has to have some meaning and connect. And sometimes we're a lot of what I do is probably more so directed to the church and people that I can encourage within already, not at the expense of not trying to reach, anybody, because I'm certainly willing to go there, but to make that message as clear as possible, but as meaningful as possible as well. Like it's, and sometimes within a 3-minute song, our attention spans are so short right now that our songs are only 2 to 3 minutes. So it's hard to say a lot in that amount of time, if that's all we're going to have. But if that is all we have, then how can you make it as meaningful and as to the point of what we're trying to say, and I think it's a conversation and a topic we do have to be thinking about, is not just making people feel comfortable and kind of just preaching to the choir, but really, how do we, like you said, how do we incorporate more discipleship? How do we, challenge people through art, through music, through books and movies and television, any kind of media that we put out? How do we challenge people to want to go deeper and pursue, Christ more fully, you know. Do you hear a song on the radio and it just entertains you? Like, you know, I can go to any radio station and find something that just, you know, makes me feel happy or you know, or does that somehow leave you impressed to do something to change either yourself or your world, or love your family more, or, you know, whatever, worship God more fully, whatever.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting, because I think probably like the greatest art, whether it's, you know, art like painting or music, I think the greatest art has largely been accomplished by Christians, you know, and in order to bring glory to God, whether it's the Sistine Chapel or, you know, like Vivaldi or something like that. Or, I mean, if you want to go more modern, maybe someone like Keith Green, you know, who was just on fire for Jesus, and he wasn't out to entertain anyone per se, even though he was entertaining. I mean, he also had songs like Asleep in the Light and things like that, where he was really, pretty strongly criticizing the church and people and trying to wake them up. And I don't think he ever, aside from those songs that were maybe directed at Christians, I don't think that he really aimed to perform for Christians. It was kind of whoever showed up, you know? And
right. I agree. Like, it's, I think sometimes we try to be too much like the world because we see what works in the world and what reaches people, and we try to replicate that rather than being raw and open with our art, but in a way that, like you said, like a Keith Green, where we're challenging people, you know, we're kind of pushing them out of that comfort zone, you know, and in just a broader discussion, I mean, that's kind of where the church is at right now. Like, we've gotten comfortable over the course of the last year of maybe not even going to church, maybe just staying home, maybe whatever, you know, and for whatever reasons, right or wrong, you know, we have to come out now on this side of it, I think, with an increased fervor and passion to say we're missing opportunities if we're not re-engaging with the culture and even with our own fellowships, to say, you know, we've got souls to save and we've got a gospel to preach, you know.
Yeah, and we're definitely meant to be relational. And, you know, I think if anyone's come out of the last year and they haven't realized that, then they probably missed, you know, the biggest thing that they could have learned or grasped from that. But it's completely different, you know. I mean, like, it's great that we can talk and have this conversation over Zoom, and it's almost like being in the same room, but it's still not exactly the same as if you were hanging out and we were like grilling, or you were actually playing music, you know. I could jump on the drums or something, but cool. There's well, hey, come over after City on the Hill and we can make it happen. But
there you go. That sounds good, man.
But yeah, there's I don't know, there's a relational aspect of just living life with people that's really important. And I mean, that's something I see at my CNA job too all the time. And I think in particular in the last year, where a lot of the families, or all of the families at some point, couldn't come and couldn't visit, you know, their residents, which is kind of tragic. And, you know, whoever's around, whether it's me or someone else, you know, we're left to kind of attempt to fill that void, and we can't, you know, really. I can give 5 minutes to a person here or there, you know, or, you know, even take up my break time and maybe talk to someone for 15 minutes or something, but we can't, you know, replace their families or their church or whatever. And, you know, I'm glad that we're in a place now where people are able to come and visit again, and we have that. But yeah, it was pretty difficult, you know, for a while, I think, for everyone.
Yes. Yeah, man. And there's days and weeks and months that we'll never get back. And there's people that did make it through that, and they, weren't even able there to be there with their loved ones at that point. And so there's some real brokenness still coming out of all of that. And it may be, months and even years that we're coming out of all of this. So where can the church step in, and where can we as Christians step in to minister and tell people about the hope of Jesus? I think that's our church here in Tennessee. Our vision statement is really about just sharing the hope of Jesus, and how can we always in our community be about that, through everything that we do. And I think that's just become a personal mission for myself, whether it's through music or through doing a podcast or a blog or whatever. It's pointing people to him and offering them some hope. And if they don't know them, how can I help you, take the steps so that you can trust him, or if you have questions, these are all good things we got to be talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, I think it's great that you do that. And I think that that's one of the ways that I would hope that maybe more Christian artists, or just Christians in general, would be able to step in and to start doing that. Because again, I think, for artists, a lot of the temptation, I think, is to come and perform and then leave, I mean, and I've worked at a lot of festivals. I've worked merchandise for people and stuff. And I've met a lot of artists and had great conversations, but I won't say who, but, there's at least one artist that I've seen like 15 plus times. And I've even worked their merchandise booth, and I've never met them or had a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot about like who you are and what your priorities like are or are not,
Yeah.
And it's not even like we're in a hurry at this one show. We can't talk to our fans or even the people working for us. It's like, obviously they just, that's not a priority for them. So,
right. Right. Yeah. That's sad, man. I mean, I wish it wasn't a mark on the way this industry is, and the way a lot of things within Christian music, and probably more so just Christian media in general. But that is a reality, that a lot of these people are in it probably for the wrong reasons, or maybe they started for the right reasons, and somewhere along the way the almighty dollar got too big or whatever. And so God, just keep us humble, keep us raise up people that have that shepherding heart, that want to encourage people, that aren't in it for the money. Like I'm not in it for the money. I like it's if I was, I'd probably, I don't know what I'd be doing, but
there's a reason why you're still a pharmacist,
That's right.
Right,
yeah, right. Exactly. So, but I think we do it because we have this just ache in our hearts to want to do it. And it kind of won't, it's that gnawing thing that you can't let it go until you do something about it. So just even starting a podcast, man, that's God's already put a vision in your heart, and you're following it. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to make time for it, and hopefully it encourages people in some way,
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will, man. Just, that's you're doing it. I love it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. And I mean, we talked quite a bit about your blog and your podcast, but how did you get started doing that? Was there something that really motivated that, or was it something you just kind of were thinking about for a long time?
Right. I guess the blog kind of came about. I was still on staff in my church, and I think I started in 2017. Just it's kind of weird because again with like putting stuff out on social media, or like I talked about YouTube. Well, I had a Facebook page, and sometimes you just post things, like thoughts about something, or you read something in the Bible and you wanted to share something, that whatever. So I think through time, just like doing Facebook posts and just like, maybe I should just start blogging about this, because it just seems like maybe that's a better format. So I think it just kind of started through that. And it's definitely been a learning experience, because it's writing like that way and songwriting are kind of different things. And, you're one involving music and one just more, extrapolating whatever you're wanting to convey. You're both trying to say something. There's a message there, but the blogging just, it's when I have to sit down and write something, it's definitely at least half an hour to an hour, probably an hour at least, to put something together and put a thing out there. And then, along with it, just getting it out to the email list that I have, and posting it on socials, and putting visual, usually try to put different, graphics together that go with it. And so, so it's definitely become a process. And sometimes I'm like, is this the best use of my time? Is this what you want me to be doing, Lord? Because it does take amount of time, and my wife will tell you that I have those conversations. But she's been a huge encouragement. And then this year we started doing the podcast, and I had wanted to do that for a long time, but just finally kind of pulled the trigger on that. And just some other things this year, like I'm just like, I'm going to start doing some of these things that I've always wanted to do, and just do them, So I hope they encourage people. I hope they're helpful, that you get something that challenges you, like we talked about again, or that just makes you think about some aspect of your faith, maybe differently, or reinforces something that you needed to hear, or whatever. So, but yeah, and maybe, I've had the desire to write a book at some point. I need to figure out like what that would look like and what it would be about. So that may be down the road at some point, but just writing and music, it's all kind of just something that I keep coming back to. So as the Lord leads, and as he gives opportunity and gives, I guess, the inspiration for it, as long as he keeps giving me ideas, then I'll keep trying to act on it. But yeah, sometimes you get a little writer's block, and you got to figure out like, what am I gonna say? Because I'm running out of content. But if you go back to the Bible, you always get some good ideas. So.
Yeah. And it sounds like our lives are pretty similar in that it sounds like we're both very busy. I've been working as a CNA full-time, sometimes more than full-time. And I try to do some volunteer marketing work for a ministry in Duluth. And I've been trying to start this podcast and trying to play music, and there's just not enough time and energy, as you know, since we've delayed this interview a few times. But I was talking to a friend about it the other day, and she was like, how do you do so much stuff? And I was like, well, I just don't rest, basically. And which is the honest answer. It's like, a lot of days I get up at 8 a.m. and then I do whatever I'm going to do. And then I work afternoons. So I go to work at 2, work till 10:30, come home and sleep. And
wow,
I've realized that it's way too much at this point. So, and I've been trying to figure out how to change that. I just took the month off from worship team at my church, which, if I'm going to cut something out, that's really not what I want to cut out, but it was like the easiest thing, to do. And I guess my hope is just that I'll end up in a career that enables me to use more of my passions, I guess. Otherwise, I'm just going to need to learn to live a balanced life, I guess, like everybody else. But
and it can be hard because you always have that desire, and I've wrestled with that a lot too, is like, I want to do these other things, but I've got to pay the bills, and so how do I navigate both? And sometimes it's like, well, where do I take that step where I kind of trust God more, out of the, always falling back on this, like, well, I have to do this job in order to keep doing this. And, I think that's part of the process, is that God leads you on that journey of knowing what he's put in your heart and what you desire to do. And he's going to keep opening those doors as you kind of keep taking those steps of faith out. And I mean, I've seen that in my own life, and just what, over the last few years, even recently, just being able to kind of move more into ministry and more into the passions and the things that I felt like but it's been a long journey, and I've always felt, this is a lot of times where I think it's just going to be something that happens overnight, because you see all these things around you, like, well, this person just went from doing this, and then one day they're just, immediately in the spotlight and doing whatever, and we think those are the stories that everybody has, and most of the time it's just steady, one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. And there's so many stories in the Bible where God calls somebody, and then it's years down the road where they actually step into that. You look at Moses or David, and just the journey they had to take, and the trust that they had to develop in the Lord to say, God, you called me to this, but I'm, David's anointed as king, but he's still tending sheep, or he's on the run from
chased
Saul
down,
or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah. And I've, I think maybe like you, I've had times where I was in like a job or a position where I was really doing what I wanted, whether that was working in music or in ministry or teaching. Those are kind of the three areas that I have the most passion for, I think. And I'm kind of hoping to move into teaching, and I think that would also lend itself to the other things. But in all those scenarios, I've always had to have like a real job too, sort of to pay the bills. Like, I'm working in this youth ministry position half-time, and then I'm just doing maintenance, somewhere or whatever. And that's always been the reality. And I think it is for most people, if they even get to do what they're really passionate about at all, but.
Right. And, and God has given you the ability to always have that other position, so that you can do that thing you're passionate about. And my nature is to say, God, take me out of this position so I can just do this, and not appreciate the opportunity he has given me to put bread on the table and to provide for my family. And so I'll focus too much on the thing I want to do, and not realize, well, he's given me an opportunity even to serve in what I am doing, which maybe isn't the role that I always want to play, but it's still a mission field even there. So there's just a lot of times where he gets me to see things from a different perspective, and I have to be like, you're right, God, and I thank you for what you've offered to me. It's I'm blessed because of it. So
and we definitely overlook those blessings, or just the things that we could be learning, or maybe are learning but don't realize it yet, or the fact that we could be ministering to our coworkers and being more intentional about that, or maybe we even already are and we don't even think about it, because we're like, well, I'm not in a ministry job, so I'm not doing ministry right now. So
right. Yep, definitely. And just from what you've been talking about, just the opportunities you've had to talk to people, even the 5-10 minutes here and there when a loved one can't be there, like, you've done something that is ministering the love of Jesus, and that's ministry, and so, and I have to be reminded of that as well, like, just those opportunities that God gives me. And it's ministry, whether it's in a church or a quote unquote ministry, you know, of some sort. It's everywhere you go is your mission field. So,
yeah. Well, we've been talking for quite a while, so we should probably wrap things up. Maybe this will even be a 2-part episode, but are there any last thoughts you have or anything you'd like to discuss or mention to anyone who's listening?
Yeah, well, you know, I really just, you know, want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk. And this has been really, you know, a blessing for me just to connect with you and to kind of go the scope of music to ministry to, you know, working a day job, all those things. I feel like there's definitely some common ground. And so, you know, I hope that somebody out there who's listening maybe is wrestling with similar things and just to get some hope through this episode and just, you know, personally, just again, thank you to you, Ian, for the opportunity and blessings on you as you continue doing your podcast and just all the work that you're doing there in Duluth. It's definitely an area that we need more people like you. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking as well, and appreciate your music and everything that you do. Speaking of which, if people want to find your music and purchase or stream or follow your blog and all that, how can they do that?
Sure. The easiest way to DerekCharlesJohnson.com is my website. So the easiest thing, there's a couple of things you can do there to either just read the blogs themselves, or you can sign up. There's a tab called As Bold as Lions. That's kind of the outlet that I've, you know, as far as blogging and podcasting, it's under this heading, As Bold as Lions. So you can go there to actually subscribe to get the blog and get devotionals to your email. And there's also music there that you can listen to. You can, I think you can stream at least clips, or I don't know if you can stream whole songs off my website, but you can purchase either MP3s or, you know, physical CDs if you're old school like me and you or you understand. And then
there's your CD right here. So
there you go. Or, you know, just Spotify, Derek Charles Johnson, Apple Music, Pandora, wherever you get music. There's just type that in and hopefully, fingers crossed, I should pop up. So I go back and forth between really just wanting to listen to everything on CDs versus knowing the world is changing and they're not going to, that's not going to be the way things go anymore. But I go to Spotify and definitely listen on there too. And but I still come back to just that physical. Got to hold it in my hands format. So it's a weird world we live in with all the different formats. I mean, I don't know if anyone can see, I even have my record player back there and stuff. So, you know. Yes, that's awesome. There's a purist right there. I need to get, I've been wanting to get into like records and vinyl and start all that. I just have to pull the trigger and hope that my wife's okay with me doing that. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you for having me. It's been a blessing. Yeah, likewise.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the DeVaney Music Podcast. This episode was recorded via Zoom using my Blue Yeti USB microphone. The interview segment was edited by Chris Cooner. The intro track was recorded by Barry Blair, the original guitarist for Audio Adrenaline, who does happen to have some solo music up on Spotify, by the way. Thank you very much to Derek Charles Johnson for taking the time to interview. You can find his latest album, Seeing for the First Time, on his website, DerekCharlesJohnson.com, along with all of his other music, not to mention the Bold as Lions blog and podcast. His music is also available on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, and all other major online music outlets. Thank you so much for listening, and please follow the DeVaney Music Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is a new podcast, and I love feedback and also recommendations, so feel free to shoot me an email at devaneyproductions@gmail.com with all of that. This podcast is available on YouTube, SoundCloud, Anchor, and should also be available on Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere else that podcasts may be streamed. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode in which I interview Phil Joel of the Newsboys to talk about his new solo album.